Did the Romans wash their mouths with urine? It is a question where the internet, with its tendency to veer towards easily spreading factoids, just loves to say, yes, yes, yes! But it doesn't really seem properly answered. My conclusion, however, is, well, yes and no. Yes, it is one of those answers, but it is a bona fide answer. So, let's explain this. First off, the reason why I say the internet has not properly answered this question is because just about all the sites that talk about this factoid have no source whatsoever, and sources are key. Even a history book or some other secondary source could work, but in very few places, even in some scholarly articles, is a source cited. Which is why I give kudos to the Smithsonian Magazine for citing a definite source, the ancient Roman poet Catullus. So what does Catullus have to say? Well, in his poem 39, he mocks an enemy of his, a Celtiberian named Ignatius, and points out that Celtiberians, a Celtic tribe in central Spain, washed their mouths with urine. So, did these Celtiberians really wash their mouths with urine? Let's see. Alongside Catullus, there are 3 other ancient sources to consider: Apuleius, Catullus, and Strabo. Apuleius mentions washing mouths with urine as one of the utterly repulsive things they do in Spain. However, he does cite Catullus on this fact, making his evidence a little less credible. The other 2 sources, on the other hand, seem more independent. Diodorus Siculus remarks that the Celtiberians wash both their teeth and their body with urine, calling it a peculiar and strange custom, which is low and partakes of great uncleanness. Strabo corroborates both of these facts, calling them a sign of slovenly character, and of how they have regard not for rational living, but rather for satisfying their physical needs and bestial instincts. However, one definite oddity in his account is that he mentions this custom is observed by the Cantabrians and the neighboring peoples, not the Celtiberians. The Cantabrians are a Celtic tribe in northern Spain. To further complicate things, he says that this is a custom shared with both the Iberians and the Celts, to show why things get complicated. This is where the Cantabrians live, this is where the Celtiberians live, this is where the Iberians live, and this is where the Celts live. This sudden expansion seems rather a big leap and a bit of a red flag. Maybe washing the mouth and even the body with urine was a custom practiced by some tribes, including the Celtiberians and Cantabrians. However, there's a strong possibility, especially with the discrepancy between who supposedly did it, that washing the mouth with urine was merely a practice civilized people like the Romans and Greeks ascribed to barbarians, and was assigned to various groups by different people. It may even be like an ancient equivalent to the very factoid this video is about. So it is hard to be certain on whether or not any of the aforementioned peoples actually did it. But these are foreigners we are talking about here. How, in the modern day, did this factoid get ascribed to the Romans themselves? Well, for one, you don't have to explain who these tribes are, which means the factoid spreads much easier. However, the change does have a justification. You see, it really depends on who you define as Roman. Technically, since the Romans came to rule these peoples, the Celtiberians, the Cantabrians, Iberians, and most of the Celts, they were thus Roman. However, these peoples were definitely not Urbani, people who lived in the city of Rome itself, a distinction Catullus himself makes in his poem. And just to clarify, since all of these authors seem to think that washing the mouth with urine is a barbaric practice, it seems unlikely the more cultured Urbani would practice this custom at all. This conclusion leaves only some foreigners as ones who maybe wash their mouths with urine. So, assuming that any of these foreigners actually did wash their mouths with urine, it could go either way. If you point at them and call them Roman, then Romans wash their mouths with urine. However, if you point at them and call them not Roman, then Romans didn't wash their mouths with urine. To summarize, things are really complicated. Maybe washing mouths with urine happened, maybe it did not. Maybe Romans did it, maybe they did not. I'm sorry, but semantics have thoroughly ruined the day. There is a second part to this factoid which I could not quite fit in before. That upper-class Roman women preferred to use the urine of young Portuguese boys. We have already established that Romans were unlikely to use urine as mouthwash, so that is covered. The Portuguese part may be linked to the location of those who did. Boy part may be linked to another factoid, which I have not checked out, that the ancient Chinese valued the urine of boys for washing their mouths. So yeah, there's that.